Switch off the camera.
Who wants to read Seven Seva sayings? Any volunteer?
I don't mind. Or
Go ahead.
Ravi. No, Ravi wants to do it. Let Ravi do it. Yes.
Raviji, go ahead.
Ashok, if you want to do it, go ahead.
No. Please go ahead. Don't wait. Let's start.
Sorry.
Avtar Meher Baba ki jai. Desire for nothing except desirelessness. Hope for nothing except to rise above all hopes. Want nothing and you will have everything. Seek not to possess anything but to surrender everything. Serve others with the understanding that in them you are serving me. Be resigned completely to my will, and my will be yours. Let nothing shake your faith in me, and all your bindings will be shaken off. Real happiness lies in making others happy. The real desire is that which leads you to become perfect in order to make others perfect. The real aim is that which aims to make others become God by first attaining Godhood yourself. Be angry with none but your weakness. Hate none but your lustful self. Be greedy to own more and more wealth of tolerance and justice. Let your temptation be to tempt me with your love in order to receive my grace. Wage war against your desires, and Godhood will be your victory. Love others as you would love yourself and all that is yours. Fortunate are they whose love is tested by misfortunes. Love demands that the lover sacrifice for the beloved. Real living is dying for God. Live less for yourself and more for others. One must die to one's own self to be able to live in all other selves. One who dies for God lives forever. This period of Sahvas is the period of my suffering and helplessness. My glorification will follow my humiliation. Avtar Meher Baba ki jai. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Thank you, Raviji. So
Just
we are reading.
call me Sunil. We have been friends for a couple of years now, so just call me Ravi and I'll call you Sunil.
Sure, I will.
We have a G in our heart for each other, right?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, I will. So we start with live for God and die for God today. And I'll read. Karthik is busy again today, so I'll start, and Kama will summarize, and anybody else please jump in and add. So this war is a necessary evil. It is in God's plan, which is to awaken humanity to higher values. If humanity fails to profit by lessons of the war, it will have suffered in vain. This war is teaching that even an ordinary person can rise to the greatest heights of sacrifice for the sake of a selfless cause. It is also teaching that all mundane things of world health, possessings, power, fame, family, and even very tenor of life on earth are transitory and devoid of lasting value. Through the lessons they bring, the incidents of war shall win man over God, who is the truth, and they will initiate him into a new life that is inspired by true and lasting values.
Jai Baba, Sunil.
Jai
So
Baba.
I wanted to just one thought which comes to my mind is that presently also the world is going through a new world order and we are waging war against disease. I mean, although this has been written um, at the backdrop of the Second World War around that time, 1941, 42, but yet we are also again waging a different war war against disease, or the pandemic and virus. And
Right.
also there is a lot of economic war in terms of the protectionism. So we're at a very diverse, divergent forces. So I think what was written then also holds good now in today's times. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. People are making unlimited sacrifices and enduring untold sufferings for the sake of their country or political ideology. They are therefore capable of the same sacrifices and endurances for the sake of God or truth. All religions have unequivocally claimed man for a life in truth. Thus, it is sheer folly to fight in the name of religion. It is time humanity had a fresh vision of truth. That's all life is one, and God is the only thing that is real and that matters. God is worth living for, and He's worth dying for. All else is in vain, an empty pursuit of illusory values. So work for spiritual freedom of humanity. Next chapter. Previous chapter, comma, anything to summarize? That was a quick one.
Yeah, Jay Baba. Actually, this two paragraphs of this very one-page chapter, live for God and die for God. It has a lot of interesting points. One is that um, through the lessons they bring, the incidents of war shall win man over for God, who is the truth, which we know from seven realities. God, who is the truth, one of the seven realities. And they will initiate him into a new life that is inspired by true and lasting values. So, in fact, yesterday when we read about the law of karma, there was this mention about the, about values. And that was very significant, where Baba talks about the law of karma in the world of values. And this is what we are all struggling to, imbibe in our daily life, how to be inspired by true and lasting values. That inspiration is given by Baba, but now we have to make the effort to implement that. And then he also talks about that war is teaching us that all the mundane things of the world, wealth, possessions, power, fame, family, and even the very tenor of life on earth are transitory and devoid of lasting value. Because one is the universal law of nature is impermanence. Change is the only permanent thing. So that is why it's transitory and devoid of lasting value, because we know that the material life is temporary, it's very ephemeral. We see that. And then um, the last line, it says, God is worth living for and is also worth dying for. All else is a vain and empty pursuit of illusory values. So, illusory values, I think Baba is talking about the material life. If the material life is the goal, success, achievement in material life, then it's illusion. We also know that even the spiritual involution, which is a medium towards, going towards nirvana, that is also called real illusion. So, material life is false illusion. Spiritual life is real illusion. False illusion plus real illusion is equal to zero. Then, when we relate this to the chapter on the travail of the new world order, because this live for God and die for God talks about war as a necessary evil. And there is a paragraph here in this chapter, travail of the new world order. The world is witnessing an acute conflict between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. On the one hand, there are selfish persons who seek their happiness blindly through lust for power, unbridled greed, and unrelieved hatred. Ignorant of the real purpose of life, they have sunk to the lowest level of civilization. They bury their higher selves in the wreckage of crumbling forms that linger on from the dead past. Bound by material interests and limited conceptions, they are forgetful of their divine destiny. They have lost their way, and their hearts are torn by the ravages of hate and rancor. On the other hand, there are persons who unveil their inherent higher selves through the endurance of pain and deprivation and through noble acts of bravery and self sacrifice. The present war is teaching man to be brave, to be able to suffer, to understand, and to sacrifice. So then I think this was written during the World War II, before World War II, because Discourses was dictated between 1938 and 1942. And we see that this statement is very universal because nothing has changed. Today we had the war in Afghanistan and the war in Syria and so on. And we also see that 1% of the population has 99% of the wealth. So technically speaking, the world has enough to feed the Maslow's hierarchy of roti, kapda, makan, basic food, shelter, clothing, education, healthcare, and all that. And then in the new humanity, there is one paragraph I would like to read. At present, the urgent problem facing humanity is to devise ways and means of eliminating competition, conflict, and rivalry in all the subtle and gross forms that they assume in the various spheres of life. Military wars are, of course, the most obvious sources of chaos and destruction. However, wars in themselves do not constitute the central problem for humanity, but are rather the external symptoms of something graver at their root. Wars and the suffering they bring cannot be completely avoided by mere propaganda against war. If they are to disappear from human history, it will be necessary to tackle their root cause. Even when military wars are not being waged, individuals or groups of individuals are constantly engaged in economic or some other subtle form of warfare. Military wars, with all the cruelty they involve, arise only when these underlying causes are aggravated. The cause of the chaos that precipitates itself in wars is that most persons are in the grip of egoism and selfish considerations, and they express their egoism and self interest individually as well as collectively. This is the life of illusory values in which man is caught. To face the truth is to realize that life is one in and through its manifold manifestations. To have this understanding is to forget the limiting self in the realization of the unity of life. So this sums up very clearly. One is about the illusory values in which man is caught. Then we talked about right understanding yesterday. Then we also know that the ego and selfish considerations are the main challenges for individuals. So war is just a symptom of the individual chaos that happens. So I believe that the whole discourses gives us this understanding of what is really happening in the universe and how do we cope up with these challenges. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Thank you, Kama. Any other comments from anybody? Or we can go forward.
Sunil, it's a brilliant correlation. Even that chapter came into my mind, the Traverse of the New Order.
Yes.
And that's how we started our discourses journey, the first reading.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's go forward to the next chapter, Work for the Spiritual Freedom of Humanity. All over the world, the spirit of man is crying out for freedom. Love of freedom and the search for freedom are the principal characteristics of humanity. In all races and in all climes, in all countries and all the times, the watchword for groping and struggling humanity has always been freedom. There are very few persons, however, who really understand the full implications of true and unqualified freedom. And there are many who, in their partial understanding of the real conditions of freedom, strive only for the attainment of that kind of existence which gives them a sense of relative freedom. Thus, different persons long for different kinds of freedom according to the different things they have come to value. Freedom to live as one wishes is sought in all spheres of life. This imperative demand for freedom usually expresses itself by fastening upon some external conditions of the kind of existence people wish to lead. Hence, those who identify their being with their country seek national or political freedom. Those who are animated by economic purposes seek economic freedom. Those who are inspired by religious aspirations seek freedom of the religion. Those who are enthusiastic about sociological or cultural ideology seek freedom of movement and freedom to express the ideals that they cherish and wish to propagate. But there are few who realize that the basic freedom which alone gives the stamp of value, of true value, to any of these different kinds of relative freedom is spiritual freedom. Even if all the external conditions of a free life were completely fulfilled and guaranteed, the soul of man would still remain in woeful bondage if it failed to realize spiritual freedom. Limits of freedom. All the different types of freedom that fasten upon some external conditions must, in their very nature, exist within certain limits. For the freedom that an individual or community or state seeks must be consistent with a similar freedom for other individuals, communities, or states. National, economic, religious, or cultural freedom expresses itself in and by means of their duality of existence. It lives on duality and is sustained by duality. Therefore, it has to be relative and limited and cannot be infinite. It exists in varying degrees. Even when it is won through persistent effort, it cannot be a permanent attainment since the external conditions having once been secured are not secured forever, but are capable of deteriorating in the course of time. I didn't understand this completely, just a bit of meaning. If anybody wants to explain more in detail, please feel free, or we can continue reading and then come back to it. Let me go ahead first. Spiritual freedom alone is unlimited. Only spiritual freedom is absolute and unlimited. When it is won through persistent effort, it is secured forever. Though spiritual freedom can and does express itself in and through the duality of existence, it is grounded in the realization of inviolable unity of all life and is sustained by it. One important condition of spiritual freedom is freedom from all wanting. It is want that fetters life through attachment to conditions that would fulfill that want. If there is no want, there is no dependence or limitation. The soul is enslaved through wanting. When the soul breaks as under the shackles of wanting, it emancipates itself from its bondage to the body's gross, subtle, and mental. This is spiritual freedom that brings with it the final realization of unity of all life and puts an end to all doubts and worries. Importance of spiritual freedom. It is only in spiritual freedom that one can have abiding happiness and unimpaired self-knowledge. It is only in spiritual freedom that there arises the supreme certainty of truth. It is only in spiritual freedom that there is final ending of sorrow and limitation. It is only in spiritual freedom that one can live for all and yet be detached in the midst of all activities. Any lesser type of freedom is comparable to a house built on sand, and any lesser type of attainment is fraught with fear of decay. Therefore, There is no gift greater than the gift of spiritual freedom, and there is no task more important than the task of helping others to achieve spiritual freedom. Those who have understood the supreme importance of spiritual freedom have not only to strive for it for themselves, but also to share the God-given duty of helping others win it. So question, we should, sometimes we read that we should help ourselves, don't worry about others too much. But here Baba says that we should help others achieve spiritual freedom. Is that a contradiction or my understanding limitation?
No, Sunil, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
There's a chapter, the task of spiritual workers. So Baba has said in that chapter and elsewhere also that wherever possible we should try to help others in the journey. So that has been already said in the discourses itself.
I see. Okay, Jai Baba. Thank you. Thanks,
So
Ashokji.
Sunil, Jai Baba, what Ashok said is correct. This chapter is followed by the next chapter, Task for Spiritual Workers. So
Okay.
actually, if you read both the chapters completely, and people can note down their questions. We'll go back paragraph by paragraph because
Sure.
these two chapters are actually practical, what I call tools that Baba has given us for spiritual aspirants, actually. So
Okay.
all the questions will be answered in both the chapters. So better to read both of them, and then we can go back and answer each of the questions. Yeah, Baba.
Jai Baba. Thank you. True service. Those who are inspired by a spirit of selfless service are quick to render unto humanity all possible help through provision of necessities like life like clothes, shelter, food and medicine, education, and other amenities of civilization. In pursuing the path of duty, they are not only prepared to fight for the weak against the aggression and oppression, but also to lay down their very lives for the sake of others. All these type of services are great and good, but from the ultimate point of view, the help that secures spiritual freedom for humanity surpasses them all. It is inseparable in importance. The way to help others attain spiritual freedom. The way to help others attain spiritual freedom is far different from the way of rendering other types of help. For the hungry, you can provide food and they can only eat it. For the naked, you can provide clothes and they can only to wear them. For the homeless, you can provide houses and they have only to dwell in them. For those who are in the agonies of spiritual bondage, however, there is no ready-made provision that can give them immediate relief. Spiritual freedom has to be won by oneself for oneself through watchful and unfailing war against the lower self and the lower desires. Those who would be soldiers in the cause of truth have to help all, not only in launching upon the thrilling enterprise of attaining victory over ourselves, but also in every step they take towards that attainment. There is no other way of sharing their burden. I want to read the last line again. Those who would be soldiers in the cause of truth have to help all, not only in launching upon the thrilling enterprise of attaining victory over themselves, but also in every step they take towards that attainment. There is no other way of sharing their burden. I have full confidence that you, my devotees, will share this burden. Many of you, for years together, have obeyed my orders and carried out my instructions through faith in me and love for me. You have stuck to me and my spiritual cause through storm and stress and thick and thin. Now the time has come for you to offer all your services in my mission of helping humanity tread the spiritual path and realize God. The eternal truth that God alone is real has to be clearly understood and unreservedly accepted, and it has to be unequivocably expressed through the words and deeds. In the full realization of truth, humanity shall attain spiritual freedom. No sacrifice is too big to set man free from spiritual bondage and help him to inherit the truth, which alone shall bring abiding peace to all, and which alone will sustain an unassailable sense of universal fellowhood cemented by ungrudging love of all, for all, and expressions of the same reality. In this God-willed, divinely planned, and predestined task of bringing spiritual freedom to humanity, you, my devotees, have to help me even at the cost of your lives. In your duty of helping others to find God, you have to welcome every type of suffering and sacrifice. Jai Baba. So that's the end of the chapters. Shall we go forward and continue the task for spiritual workers? Come up.
Yeah, we should go back and discuss some of the things.
Discuss. Okay. Yeah. So work for spiritual freedom of humanity. Cry for freedom. Would you like to just briefly summarize each para or each topic?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ji Baba. So the reason I said this, there are questions that are here will be answered in the next chapter, but that's okay. So what I would say is this chapter work for the spiritual freedom of humanity. So if you dissect this title, the word spiritual freedom jumps up. What does it mean? If you go back to the chapter on deeper aspects of sadhana, page 258 to, starting from page 258, there we were talking about spiritual sadhana or practice, spiritual sadhana in the spiritual realm, which sadhana in spiritual and material realms. So this chapter is kind of related to that in a technical sense, because when you talk about spiritual freedom, you also have to talk about material freedom. Today, humanity or any time for a human being, you can't just say that, oh, forget about material freedom, focus on who am I. That's not happening, because the material body is the medium through which the consciousness of the drop soul has to emancipate, get liberated, or attain God realization. That is why Baba talks about those who would be soldiers in the cause of truth have to help all, not only in launching upon the thrilling enterprise of attaining victory over themselves, but also in every step they take toward that attainment. There is no other way of sharing their burden. He also says there is no gift greater than the gift of spiritual freedom, and there is no task more important than the task of helping others to achieve spiritual freedom. Those who have understood the supreme importance of spiritual freedom, which is answering the question, who am I, have not only to strive for it for themselves, but also to share the God given duty of helping others win it. So it clearly says that you don't have to build, as he says, the ways to help others attain spiritual freedom is far different from the way of rendering other types of help, which he talks about the food, shelter, and clothing aspect. From the ultimate point of view, the help that secures spiritual freedom for humanity surpasses them all. It is insuperable in importance. What it clearly says that first you have to get your material freedom and spiritual freedom, and you don't have to, you have the option of helping others in their food, shelter, clothing, but the biggest help one can give is spiritual freedom, which is the understanding of the seven realities. Because we all know that every individual, whether he's having physical suffering or mental suffering, is because of his sanskaras based on his past lives. And that is why, as in Vedanta, they say, you don't get what you want, you get what you deserve. So we all deserve what we have got. So there is nothing wrong in it. But of course, the question would be, Baba talks about love and selfless service. What it means is that you have to do love and selfless service without any attachment to the fruits of your action. That is why it says that in the page 341, even when material freedom is won through persistent effort, it cannot be a permanent attainment, since the external conditions have once been secured are not secured forever but are capable of deteriorating in the course of time. So the phenomenal world of duality of forms, the material world, is constantly changing. Nothing is permanent. Similarly, with spiritual involution, you keep going from first plane to second plane to third plane, and you get new kinds of siddhis, and you start either using it for the benefit of others or yourself, or you can misuse it. And that's why in the fourth plane you get, that is a dangerous plane. So up till the fourth plane, it's very difficult. So coming back to this chapter, the kinds of freedom, there are only two kinds of freedom. One is material freedom and spiritual freedom. And in material freedom, there are many types of freedom, independence, financial freedom, in the next chapter, you will read about the different types of, freedom one we can talk about. But spiritual freedom alone is unlimited. We know that it is about knowing thyself, which is going to happen only through Manonash. And what is the importance of spiritual freedom? Because only in spiritual freedom that one can have abiding happiness and unimpaired self-knowledge. So that is Sachitananda, power, knowledge, bliss. So abiding happiness is bliss, which we already experience unconsciously in the sleep state, sound sleep state. We want to bring this bliss into our waking state. So that can only happen. It is only in spiritual freedom that there arises the supreme certainty of truth. And then coming back to the subtitle, true service. So Baba here again talks about, yes, it's nice to help people running charitable institutions, but do you know yourself? Have you attained spiritual freedom? And this is where we found all those crises that happened with what I call as the Rajat Gupta, Rajaratnam syndrome, and many other scandals that happened in the West and also in the East, with the jewelry guy and, with the, what's his name, Kingfisher guy and so on. And way to help others attain spiritual freedom is, Baba says very clearly, first you have to work on yourself, on your own spiritual freedom. And then in the process, if you're able to share your understanding of spirituality, you can do that. That is the best form of service one can do. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, thank you. Thanks, Kama. Any other comments? Anybody else? We can go to the next chapter, the task for spiritual workers. I'm very happy that in response to my call, you have gathered to receive my message to you. On the path, the most important condition of discipleship is readiness to work for the spiritual cause of bringing humanity closer and closer to realization of God. I'm glad to note that through faith and love for me, you have wholeheartedly offered yourself to share in my universal work of spiritualizing the world. I have full confidence that you will not only inherit for yourself the truth that I bring, but also become enthusiastic and valiant torchbearers for humanity, which is enveloped in deep ignorance. Nature of spiritual work. Because of its supreme importance for the true and final well-being of humanity, spiritual work has a natural and imperative claim on all who love humanity. It is therefore very necessary to be quite clear about its nature. The whole world is firmly established in the false idea of separateness and being caught up in illusion of duality. It is subject to all the complexities of duality. Spiritual workers have to redeem the world from the throes of imagined duality by bringing home to it truth of the unity of all life. The cause of illusion of manyness is that the soul, in its ignorance, identifies itself with its bodies. The gross, subtle, and mental bodies are all mediums for experiencing through the ego mind the different states of world of duality. But they cannot be mediums for knowing the true nature of the soul, which is above them all. By identifying with the bodies, the soul gets caught up in the ignorance of manyness. The soul in all the bodies with the ego mind is really one undivided existence. However, as it gets mixed up with these bodies and the ego mind, which are only its vehicles, it considers itself as limited, and it looks upon itself as being only one among many of creation, instead of looking upon itself as the only one reality without a second. Every soul is eternally and inviolably one with the one undivided and indivisible universal soul, which is the soul reality. Yet false identification with the bodies and ego mind creates the illusion of manyness and of differentiation within the whole. The bodies with the ego mind are only the mediums or the vehicles of consciousness, and as the soul experiences the different inner planes through its different mediums or vehicles, it goes through different states of consciousness. God realization. Most souls are unconscious of their true nature as God, who is the unity and the reality of all souls. God realization is latent in them, since it has not yet come to be experienced consciously. Those who have cast off the veil of duality experience the soul through its independently of any mediums or vehicles. In this experience, the soul consciously knows itself as being identical with God. Life in the truth of unity of all brings with it freedom from all limitations and sufferings. It is the self-affirmation of the infinite as infinite. In this state of spiritual freedom and perfection, the ego life is finally and completely surrendered in order to experience and release the divine life in the truth. And God is known and affirmed as the only reality worth living for. To realize God is to dwell in eternity. It is a timeless experience. But spiritual work must be done for the souls who are caught up in the maze of creation, which is bound by time. Spiritual workers cannot afford to ignore the element of time in creation. To ignore time would be to ignore the spiritual work itself. It is imperative to be discriminatingly aware of the flow of time in creation and to appreciate fully the supreme importance of the moment in the future that shall witness the universal dispensation of the truth of spiritual wisdom. That's importance of time. Task for spiritual workers. Yeah, here we are. The task for spiritual workers is to help me in this universal dispensation of truth to suffering humanity. You have not only to prepare humanity to receive this truth, but also to get established in it yourself. It is extremely important to remember that you can help others to gain spiritual freedom and to come out of the illusion of duality only if you yourself do not forget this idea of unity while working for others who are inclined to create divisions where they do not exist and who thus allow no respite to spiritual workers. The minds of people have to be completely purged of all forms of selfishness and narrowness if they are to inherit the life and eternity that I bring. It is by no means an easy task to persuade people to give up their selfishness and narrowness. It is not by accident that people are divided into rich and poor, the pampered and the neglected, the rulers and the ruled, the leaders and the masses, the oppressors and the oppressed, the high and the low, the winner of laurels and the recipients of ignominy. These differences have been created and sustained by those who, through their spiritual ignorance, are attached to them and who are settled in perverse thinking and feeling that they are not even conscious of their perversity. They are accustomed to look upon life as divided into inviolable compartments, and they are unwilling to give up their separative attitude. When you launch upon your spiritual work, you will be entering into a field of divisions that people desperately cling to, and they accentuate and strive to perpetuate consciously or unconsciously. When
Deva,
people,
I think
yes,
you would have got your answers in this paragraph.
yes, very clear. Win people to life of truth, more condemnation of these divisions will not only not enable you to destroy them. The divisions are being nourished by separative thinking and feeling, which can yield only to the touch of love and understanding. You have to win people to the life of truth. You cannot coerce them into spirituality. It is not enough that you should have unimpaired friendliness and untarnished goodwill in your hearts. If you are to succeed in your work, you have to bring home to them the faith in the conviction that you're helping them to redeem themselves from bondage and suffering, and to realize the highest to which they are rightfully heirs. There is no other way to help them attain spiritual freedom and enlightenment. For rendering spiritual help, you should have a clear understanding of the following 4 points. Number 1, apparent descent to a lower level. It may often be necessary for you to apparently descend to the lower level of those whom you're trying to help. Though your purpose is to raise people to higher levels of consciousness, they might fail to profit by what you say if you do not talk in terms they understand. What you convey to them through your thoughts and feelings should not go over their heads. They are bound to miss the point unless you adapt it to their capacity and experience. However, it is equally important to remember that while doing this, you should not actually lose your own high level of understanding. You will change your approach and technique as they gradually arrive at deeper and deeper understanding, and your apparent descent to lower level will only be temporary. Number 2, spiritual understanding ensures all-sided progress. You must not divide life into departments and then begin to deal with each department separately and exclusively. Departmentalized thinking is often an obstacle to integral vision. Thus, if you divide life into politics, education, morality, material advancement, science, art, religion, mysticism, and culture, and then think exclusively of one of these aspects, the solution that you bring to life can neither be satisfactory nor final. But if you succeed in awakening the spiritual inspiration and understanding, progress in all these spheres of life is bound to follow automatically. You will have to aim at providing, as spiritual workers, the complete and real solution for all the individual and social problems of life. Number 3, spiritual progress consists of spontaneous growth of understanding from within. As spiritual workers, you have also to remember that spiritual wisdom you desire to convey to others is already latent in them, and that you have only to be instrumental in unveiling that spiritual wisdom. Spiritual progress is not a process of accumulating from without, it is a process of unfoldment from within. A perfect master is absolutely necessary for anyone to arrive at self-knowledge, but the true significance of the help given by the Master consists in the fact that he enables others to come into full possession of their own latent possibilities. Number 4, some questions are more important than answers. You as spiritual workers must not lose sight of real work the Master desires to get done through you. When it is clearly understood that spiritual wisdom is latent in all, you will no longer be anxious to provide others with the ready-made answers and solutions. In many cases, you will be content to set up for others a new problem or to clarify for others the nature of the problems they face. You may have done your duty if you ask them a question that they would not ask themselves when placed in some practical situation. In some cases, you will have done your duty if you succeeded in putting them in a searching and questioning attitude so that they themselves begin to understand and tackle their problems along more fruitful and creative lines. To give them a deeper point of view or to suggest to them a fruitful line of thought and action may itself mean much more than thrusting upon them the results of your judgment. The question that you may help them to formulate for themselves should be neither or merely theoretical nor unnecessarily complicated. If they are simple, straight, and fundamental, these questions will answer themselves and people will find their own solutions. You will have rendered indispensable and valuable service to them because without your tactful intervention, they would not have arrived at the solution of their multifarious problems from spiritual point of view. Next one is overcoming obstacles. It has been seen that spiritual workers must necessarily be confronted with many obstacles, but obstacles are meant to be overcome. Even if some of them seem to be inseparable, you have to do your best to help others irrespective of results or consequences. Obstacles and their overcoming, success and failure are all illusions within the infinite domain of unity. Your task is already done when it is performed wholeheartedly. If you are steadfast and one-pointed in your desire to help my cause of awakening humanity to the sole reality and the ultimate worthwhileness of God and God alone, you will get many opportunities for spiritual work. There's ample scope for work in this field. You must do your work without worrying about consequences, irrespective of success or failure, but be confident that the result of the work done in the spirit and with the understanding is assured. Through the untiring activities of spiritual workers, humanity shall be initiated into a new life of abiding peace and dynamic harmony, unconquerable faith and unfading bliss, immortal sweetness and incorruptible purity, creative love and infinite understanding. Jai Baba. So any comments, any suggestions, any insights?
Jai Baba Sunil.
Yes, Jai Baba Ashok.
This is, I think, this is a very. The both chapters are very, practical, and they can also be, implemented in our professional life. Where we do a lot of, communication training or corporate training. So this has got a lot of relevance for me in my professional life also. I mean, some parts of it which we can apply to that. And besides that, they are very profound on how we should go ahead and spread the good word about Baba's literature, Baba's work, Baba's spiritual work, the evolution journey. So I think after spending this last 1.5 years, there's something which we can share with others. Is what my first reaction. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. So he says that we have to prepare ourselves first, and then I don't know whether we have to, at what level we are qualified to spread the message, or everybody is irrespective of levels. Do we
I
have
think
to?
Baba
Yeah.
has said that I put my name in the ears, and from the ear to the heart or the journey, I will do it. So that is one very, very simple takeaway. But even otherwise, if somebody has some questions which we can go back, research and answer. Of course, we are in the process. We are not yet fully, graduated from the School of Spiritual Literature, but this could be the end goal maybe a couple of years from now when one feels confident and one gets the green light from Baba.
Jai Baba.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, Ashok. Another point is, if we know exactly what we are, if we go to help somebody, we have to know very clearly what we are trying to help. At least communicate how much we know and how much it can be helped. If we are clear in our communication, because we are not, we cannot be a perfect helper to anybody, because the people who seek help are in different levels, and sometimes we don't even understand what exactly they are looking for. They themselves do not know. But I think our attitude should be, we have to try to help as much as we know. That's what I say. But main thing is, as Ashok said, putting Baba's name in people's ears is our job, and it's up to Baba to take from ear to heart. That's his job.
Jai Baba
Yeah.
Sunil, I
Yes.
just wanted to add, he has given the 4 postulates, the 4 things which we have to do in the journey, the 4 hints for spiritual workers. So first is that apparent descent to a lower level. So it may often be necessary for you to apparently descend to the lower level of those whom you're trying to help. Okay. So maybe some people have very, very simple questions that what is discourses? What is God speaks? At least we can say that discourses is the manual of how to live, and God speaks is the when, what, where, and what. What I'm trying to say that even simple, we need not be very, very high level, very, very, PhD level or postdoctorate, double doctorate level. If people have some simple questions, like
Right.
my one professor was asking me, please send me just the PDF file of God Speaks. You've told me about Baba. So I mean that is something which we can do because God Speaks is is the authority, and we can at least share that. I'm saying even small little things, mundane things, would be you are spreading the good word is what I feel. Of course, this is like a kindergarten level of example I'm giving, but I think we can do small little things as well to spread the good word. Jai Baba.
Yes, agreed, Shokji, completely. Jai Baba.
See, even if you want to come down to the other people's level, first of all, we have to understand what level they are in. Right? There's another task for us.
Yep.
Agreed, Ravi. That's an assessment task which we do. We also do in our corporate training. First, we do a needs analysis, then we do a corporate training, and then we see the end result. So we could use that analogy also here. I mean, that process here, or any other process.
I think the level here is just somebody has a question, and if we think we have the answer after reading God Speaks and Discourses, we share that answer in simple ways.
Yes, Sunilji. And also we have so many other forums like Ward Parks or Don Stevens, and so much of literature available on YouTube where we can go and research and get some answers.
Right. Any insights about the point 2? Spiritual understanding ensures all-sided progress. You must not divide life into departments and then begin to deal with each department separately and exclusively.
Jai Baba, I think it's again what I call as a top-down approach and a bottoms-up approach.
Right.
So the top-down approach is the spiritual aspect, which we know from our 5,000 year, that in India, it has been asked, we only have to focus on our spiritual growth. Who am I? So the material life is just a medium, as we know, to take care of the body. It's as Nisargadatta Maharaj or this guy says, it's the food body. The body needs to be sustained by food. It's a necessity. But apart from that, you don't need titles, you don't need penthouses, and so on and so forth. So bottoms up approaches again are school system. We start with the alphabets, we read words, we make sentences, and then we start reading different subjects: maths, physics, maths, science, moral science, history, geography, and so on. Similarly, in the material world or the laws of matter, it starts with mathematics, then physics, chemistry, biology, and so on. And we have so many different subsectors in each. So that is what we call as departmentalized thinking. Departmentalized thinking is useful for the material life to attain material freedom. But to have spiritual freedom, which is to answer the question, who am I? And I am God, to experience and realize that, we need to have a top down holistic approach. And that, I think, God speaks clearly, gives us the scientific way of approaching this, the theme of creation. So the analogy we use is the Big Bang, which is the home point where the impulse of who am I starts this whole process. And that is itself as an illusion, because this waking state, our reading, is also a waking dream from which we have not awakened, but we have to go through this process. So I think that is why it says, don't divide life into politics, education, morality, material advancement, science, art, because then you can get caught up in all of these, because each of them are beautiful in their own sense: music, art, so on and so forth. But the real purpose of our life as a human being is, who am I? The answer is also given, is to Manonash. That is why it keeps repeating here. As spiritual workers, you have also to remember that the spiritual wisdom you desire to convey to others is already latent in them, and that you have only to be instrumental in unveiling that spiritual wisdom. Now, the question is, if everybody has this latent aspect of spiritual wisdom in them, how come it's not being awakened? Again, because of sanskaras. Because their sanskaras are dominating them to focus on something which we may consider unimportant, but we also went through that. So everybody is in different levels of their spiritual growth. Some people are stuck in kindergarten, the 80-20 rule, the herd mentality. And then you keep going up the levels. And as we know, it's like climbing Mount Everest. Not everybody is going to be able to do that. So spiritual progress is not a process of accumulating from without. It's not by learning Vedanta, Advaita, Bhagavad Gita, and so on and so forth. Those are all mediums. The physicists are trying to find out the origin of the universe, but they are stuck in the gross sphere of existence. Baba has talked about the subtle and mental sphere, which are much more larger. So spiritual progress is a process of unfoldment from within. So what we are trying to do is unlearning the ignorance, the spiritual ignorance that we have about ourselves, caught up in duality. And that is why Krishnamurti said that we need to learn, the technical we are only learning for our technical field, for our material life, how to use a smartphone. But in spiritual life, it is about dissolution of the ego, which is about sanskaras, unwinding sanskaras. And then it clearly says here, perfect master is absolutely necessary for anyone to arrive at self-knowledge. This is obvious, but it's good to repeat that. But the true significance of the help given by the master consists in the fact that he enables others to come into the full possession of their own latent possibilities. Again, the word latent. I've given this analogy before. A hungry man who's been hungry for 10 days, he's desperately praying to God for food, and God sends him a person with food, but this person is so weak, he can't lift his finger. So the stranger spoon feeds him. But we know that the hungry person has to chew the food and swallow it. Similarly, the perfect master is only going to guide us, but we have to do the work. And also, one important thing that is repeated here, which we need to be cognizant of, is task for spiritual workers says task for spiritual workers is to help me in this universal dispensation of the truth to suffering humanity. You have not only to prepare humanity to receive this truth, but also to get established in it yourself. It is extremely important to remember that you can help others to gain spiritual freedom and to come out of the illusion of duality only if you yourself do not forget this idea of unity while working for others. And in the previous chapter, I'm repeating this again, that there is no gift greater than gift of spiritual freedom. There is no task more important than the task of helping others to achieve spiritual freedom. Those who have understood the supreme importance of spiritual freedom have not only to strive for it for themselves, but also to share the God-given duty of helping others win it. So in both chapters, the same thing is repeated in different ways, that we have to not only work on ourselves, that is also very important. We can't get stuck. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Thank you, Kama. Shall we go forward? Qualifications of the aspirant?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, the part one, entering into realities of inner life. Through realization of truth, the ultimate destiny of all persons, there are very few who have the necessary preparation for the early fulfillment of this glorious destiny. The mind of the worldly individual is darkened by a thick layer of accumulated sanskaras, which must be considerably weakened for the aspirant even to enter the spiritual path. The usual method for gradually dissipating the load of sanskaras is to follow as strictly as possible the external code of religious rituals and ceremonies. The stage of external conformity to the religious injunctions or traditions is known as the pursuit of Shariat or Karma Kanda. It covers actions like offering daily prayers, visiting holy places, performing duties prescribed by the scriptures, and observing well-established rules of the ethical codes generally accepted by the moral consciousness of the times. The stage of external conformity is useful in its own way as a spiritual discipline, though it is by no means free from evil effects. For it not only tends to make one dry, rigid, and mechanical, but it often nourishes some kind of subtle egoism. However, most persons are attached to the life of external conformity because they find it the easiest way of placating their uneasy consciences. Realities of inner life. The soul often spends several lives in gathering the lessons of external conformity, but there always comes a time when it tires of external conformity and becomes more interested in the realities of the inner life. When a worldly person takes to this higher kind of search, he might be said to have become an aspirant. Like the insect that passes through metamorphosis to the next stage of existence, the aspirant transcends the phase of external conformity, Shariat or Karmakanda, and enters upon a path of spiritual emancipation, known as Tarikat or Adhyatma Marg. In this higher phase, the aspirant is no longer satisfied by external conformity with certain rules, but wants to acquire those qualifications that would make his inner life spiritually beautiful.
Yeah, Baba, I have a question here. So here they are saying that all this karma kanda or external spiritual activities is not of much significance or not the only way to our spiritual emancipation. So So by offering any flowers or offering any dhoop batti, agarbatti and all, these are all very, very mechanical unless it's done from the bottom of the heart. So that's something like that was mentioned earlier in this paragraph.
Yeah.
You know? So I think all these traditions or karma kanda are not that important or significant, except that to the visible eye, we see that okay, we are doing some practices. I think it has to come from within. The real Shraddha comes from within. That is what I could get from this.
Right.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Limitations of conventions. From the standpoint of the realities of inner life, the life of external conformity may often be spiritually barren, and a life that deviates from such rigid conformity may often be spiritually rich. In seeking conformity with the established conventions and formality, one is almost always prone to slip into the life of false or illusory values rather than a life based on true and lasting values. What is conventionally recognized need not always be spiritually sound. On the contrary, many conventions express and embody illusory values since they have come into existence as a result of working of average minds that are spiritually ignorant. Illusory values are mostly conventional because they grow into the matrix of mentality which is most common. This does not mean that conventions necessarily embody nothing but illusory values.
So Jai Baba Sunil, I think what is conventionally recognized need not always be spiritually sound. Is very profound.
Right. Freedom from the convention due to critical thought. Sometimes people stick to unconventional things for no other reason than that they are out of the ordinary. The unusual nature of their pursuits or interests enables them to feel their separateness and difference from others and to take delight in it. Unconventional things often generate interest merely through their novelty in contrast with those that are conventional. The illusory values of the usual become insipid through familiarity, and the mind then has a tendency to transfer the illusion of the value to the other things that are not usual instead of trying to discover the true and lasting values. Transcending the stage of external conformity does not imply a merely mechanical and thoughtless change from conventionality to the unconventionality. Such change would be essential in the nature of reaction and could in no way contribute towards a life of freedom and truth. The freedom from conventionality that appears in the life of the aspirant is not due to any uncritical reaction, but it is due to the exercise of critical thought. Those who would transcend the stage of external conformity and enter into the high life of inner realities must develop the capacity to distinguish between false and true values, irrespective of conventionality and unconventionality. The rise from Shariat or Karmakanda to Tarikat, Adhyatma Marga, is not to be interpreted, therefore, as merely a departure from external conformity. It is not a change from conventionality to idiosyncrasy, from usual to the unusual. It is a change from life of thoughtless acceptance of established traditions to a mode of being that is based upon thoughtful appreciation to the difference between the important and unimportant. It is a change from a state of illicit ignorance to a state of critical thoughtfulness. At the stage of mere conformity, the spiritual ignorance of an individual is often so complete that he does not even realize that he is ignorant. But when the person is being awakened and enters the path, he begins to realize the need for true light. In the initial stages, the effort to attain this light takes the form of intellectual discrimination between the lasting and transitory, the true and the false, the real and the unreal, the important and the unimportant. Bankruptcy of barren beliefs. For the spiritual aspirant, however, it is not enough to exercise merely intellectual discrimination between false and the true. Though intellectual discrimination is undoubtedly the basis for all further preparation, it yields its fruit only when newly perceived values are brought into relation with practical life. From the spiritual viewpoint, what matters is not theory but practice. The ideas, beliefs, opinions, views, or doctrines that a person might hold intellectually constitute a superficial layer of human personality. Very often someone believes in one thing and does exactly the opposite. The bankruptcy of barren beliefs is all the more pitiable because the person who feeds upon them often suffers from the delusion that he is spiritually advanced, when in the truth he has not even begun spiritual life. Dogmas and creeds. Sometimes even a wrong view which is held with fervor may indirectly invite an experience that opens the gates to spiritual life. Even at the stage of Shariat or Karmakanda, allegiance to religions is not infrequently a source of inspiration for many selfless and noble acts. For while the dogmas or creeds are blindly accepted, they are often held with a fervor and enthusiasm that supply a dynamic element to the ideology that has been accepted by the person for the moment. Dogmas and creeds, as compared with the barren views and doctrines, have the distinct advantage of being embraced not only by the intellect but also by the heart. They cover and affect a wider part of the personality than purely theoretical opinions. Dogmas and creeds often harmful. Dogmas and creeds generally, however, are as much a source of evil as of good, because in them the guiding vision is clouded owing to the degeneration of suspension of critical thinking. If allegiance to creeds and dogmas has sometimes been good for the individual or the community to which he belongs, it has more often done harm. Though the mind and the heart are involved in allegiance to dogmas and creeds, both function in such cases under the serious handicap of suspension of critical thought. Hence, dogmas and creeds do not contribute to unmixed good. Need for putting theory into practice. When a person gives up uncritically accepted dogmas and creeds in favor of views and doctrines to which he has devoted thought, there is a certain amount of advance insofar as his mind now has begun to think and critically examine its beliefs. Very often, however, the newly held beliefs are seen to lack the fervor and enthusiasm that characterize allegiance to dogmas and creeds. If these newly held beliefs lack motive power, they belong only to the superficial aspects of life, and they hang loosely upon the person like an overcoat. The mind has been emancipated from the domination of uncultured emotion, but this is often achieved by sacrificing the cooperation of heart. If the results of critical thought are to be spiritually fruitful, these results must again invade and recapture the heart so as to enlist its cooperative functioning. In other words, the ideas that have been accepted after critical examination must again be released into active life if they are to yield their full benefit. In the process of practical living, they often undergo a healthy transformation and become more soundly interwoven with the very fabric of life. Critical and creative thinking balances mind and heart. The transition from external conformity, Shariat or Karmakanda, to the life of inner realities, Tarikat or Adhyatma Marga, involves two steps: freeing the mind from inertia of uncritical acceptance based upon blind imitation and stirring it to critical thinking. And number two, bringing the results of critical and discriminative thinking into practical life. In order to be spiritually fruitful, thinking must be not only critical but creative. Critical and creative thinking leads to spiritual preparation by cultivating those qualities that contribute towards the perfection and balancing of the mind and heart and the release of unfettered divine love. Another chapter. Anybody volunteers to summarize it? Come up.
Yeah, Jai Baba. I think the next four parts, because this qualifications of the aspirant, which is the main title, we have four parts. So this part that you read, entering into the realities of inner life.
Mm-hmm.
So inner life is Adhyatma Marga, Tarikat, which is entering upon the path of spiritual emancipation. The outer path is what? Shariat or Karmakanda, the stage of external conformity to religious injunctions or traditions. So here it says, like the insect that passes on through metamorphosis to the next stage of existence, the aspirant transcends the phase of external conformity, Shariat or Karmakanda, and enters upon the path of spiritual emancipation known as Tarikat or Adhyatma Marg. In this higher phase, the aspirant is no longer satisfied by external conformity with certain rules, but wants to acquire those qualifications that would make his inner life spiritually beautiful. I think in this group itself, I think depending on what kind of family background you come from, especially for people who are coming from a Baba family, second generation, third generation, I believe the Adhyatma Marga or Tarikat is what you have been, imbibed in. Of course, you will have, the different Ganesh Puja and all that, but the focus definitely, Baba is all about Adhyatma Marga because he said all those things that he did, Manonash and the new life, was to eliminate rituals and all those conventional belief systems because we are living a different life now, a digital economy. So I'm an example of somebody who had to go through Shariat or Karmakanda, and then I had to transcend towards Adhyatma Marga. This is again the grace of Baba. Of course, I didn't know anything, but I was stuck. I knew that. So when I look back, this particular chapter speaks especially for me and many other people who had to go through this transition. And I think when Ashok was talking about the, is it important? I think we have to go through this. We have to go through kindergarten. We have to go through all those things. So everybody has to go through Shariat Karmakanda in this lifetime or past lifetimes and then enter into the Adhyatma Marga. And then what this chapter talks about is freedom from convention due to critical thought. So there is this herd mentality of blind acceptance, blind faith, because of conscious or unconscious ignorance. Most people, people are divided into God fearing and God loving. So the insight that came to me is external conformity is almost like a God fearing. Oh, I got to do these rituals. I'm born in a certain community. I have to do what has been prescribed in my religion. But what they fail to understand, the Adhyatma, the Karma Kanda, the rituals are just a medium, a transition state. But for that, you need to have the right teacher or guide to explain all these things. I remember when I had my thread ceremony, which is, nobody told me what is the significance of it. For example, the first three threads, the brahmacharya, is supposed to be good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And after you get married, you have six, you have duties and responsibilities, and so on. I don't know much more than that. And then the Gayatri Mantra, which is considered spiritually very vibrational and helps one's inner being, is a very powerful mantra if you recite it properly. And actually, when you're doing the ritual, like 108 Gayatri Mantra in the morning, afternoon, 32 and 64 in the evening, if you do it mechanically, it's a ritual. It's not going to change ourselves. But if you do it, actually, it is a pranayama practice, the Om Bhur Swan, inhaling, retention, and exhalation. That is the significance of the Gayatri Mantra, is about like Vipassana practice of a different kind, where you're doing this, this kind of Tarikata Adhyatma Marga to become awakened to the fact that you as a drop soul are part of the universal oversoul. And again, this freedom from convention due to critical thought, this is what we are doing because Baba understood that this century is going to be of the intellect transcending toward intuition. And that's why we have smartphones. So everybody has the opportunity to use their critical discrimination, Vivek and Vairagya. So discrimination between true and false. And it clearly says that the rise from Shariat, Karmakanda to Tarikat, Adhyatma Marga is not to be interpreted, therefore, as being merely a departure from external conformity. It is a change from a life of thoughtless acceptance of established traditions to a mode of being that is based upon thoughtful appreciation of the difference between the important and the unimportant. So the important thing we know is God realization. That is the only important thing. The unimportant thing is we have to take care of this material body. So you have to have an education, or you become an entrepreneur or a professor or a corporate guy. But that is only part of the Maslow's hierarchy. You have to go through self-esteem and self-actualization. And again, he talks about the bankruptcy of barren beliefs and dogmas and creeds. I was looking at this whole thing about Hindutva and Islam. They believe he's the last prophet, and Christianity, which believes only Jesus died for, all those things that are happening, especially in this time when we have all the knowledge, but there is no spiritual wisdom. So that is why it says that though intellectual for the spiritual aspirant, however, it is not enough to exercise merely intellectual discrimination between the false and the true. Though intellectual discrimination is undoubtedly the basis for all further preparation, intellectual discrimination yields its fruit only when newly perceived values are brought into relation with practical life. From the spiritual viewpoint, what matters is not theory but practice. So even with discourses and God speaks, I can be, very, I can speak, probably interpret it, but am I putting it into practice? That is my challenge, and it is a challenge for all Baba lovers and people with other operating systems. So God speaks discourses is inspiration, 1%, as Thomas Edison said. Perspiration, 99%, we have to do it. And I think the same thing was explained in the sadhana thing, page number 262, where when the deeper aspects of sadhana, where he talks about karma yoga, he said karma yoga, or the yoga of action, consists in acting according to the best intuitions of the heart without fear or hesitation. In sadhana, what counts is practice and not mere theory. Sound practice is far more important than sound theory. Practice based upon right knowledge will, of course, be more fruitful, but even a mistake in a practical direction may have its own valuable lessons to bring. Mere theoretical speculation, however, remains spiritually barren, even when it is flawless. So again, this is a clear indication that theory is only 1%. We have to put it into practice, and that's going to happen right up to the 6th plane. And then we have to get the grace of Baba to get Fana, Nirvana, or Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And so theory and practice is a very important aspect. I call it theoretical intellectual knowledge to transition towards practical experiential understandings or spiritual wisdom. Now, the last paragraph is very important. I mean, from my understanding, transition from external conformity to the life of inner realities, Adhyatma Marga. Number one, involves two steps, is giving us a practical solution, freeing the mind from the inertia of uncritical acceptance based upon blind imitation and steering it to critical thinking. When will that happen? Most of us are stuck. The children are looking at the parents are ignorant about their spiritual and material life, so the cycle keeps going on. So again, the grace of Baba happens, and based on our own past karma, as we have read in Reincarnation and Karma. And then number two, bringing the results of critical and discriminative thinking into practical life. So now we are on the other side of the fence. We have this discourses and God speaks. We have this critical discrimination, but are we putting into practice? So in order to be spiritually fruitful, thinking must be not only critical, but creative. Critical and creative thinking leads to spiritual preparation by cultivating those qualities that contribute toward the perfection and balancing of mind and heart and the release of unfettered divine life. So again, very important sentence, balancing of mind and heart. Then critical and creative thinking leads to spiritual preparation by cultivating those qualities. Again, we have to put effort, persistent effort, infinite, what do you call as intense effort and infinite patience. That is part of the journey for this spiritual preparation. So definitely one can't keep saying, I love Baba. You have to work on the how to love God postulates and my wish and putting it into practice. Just doing the BBC, the blah, blah, blah is not going to happen. We have to work on it. Of course, leave it to Baba whether he transitions us. That is a very important aspect out here. So to conclude, I will just point out, which I don't want to read, but someone can read it, page 98. It talks about heart must be free to determine ends of life, and harmony of mind and heart implies cooperative functioning. So this balancing of mind and heart is beautifully explained in page 98. So if somebody wants to read it, I would appreciate that. Jai Baba. Thanks. Ashok, would you like to read page number 98 from Discourses?
It's on the screen. I can read it. Yeah. Love to read it.
Or even Soma and Jayanti also. Sorry, I know I'm not discriminating here.
No. If they want to read, please.
Let's ask the lady. Sorry, Jayanti or Soma, would you like to read that particular page, which kind of complements this last paragraph?
Let Jayanti read it.
Page number 98.
Please let Jayanti read it.
Is she there? Hello? Jayanti, are you there?
I'm there.
Okay. Would you mind reading?
Yes, from between the two extremes.
Yeah, the two paragraphs. Yeah, 98, page 98 from the top. Yes.
Love and happiness. Love and happiness. Huh? Love and happiness are the only important things in life, and they are both absent in the dry and factual knowledge accessible to the intellect.
Sorry. No, I said this is from chapter Avenues of Understanding in Discourses 7th edition, page 98. Oh, this is, I think, the digital copy. That's why. Okay,
Yes.
okay. There's a difference. You have to go to the chapter, Sunil. It's called, this is before the chapter of Problem of Sex, the Avenues of Understanding. This comes after Selfless Service. Yeah, right. That's it. Avenues to Understanding. Keep going and keep going to the last page of this. Yeah, that's the one, 98. Yeah, this is the one, please.
Heart must be free to determine ends of life. The mind is a treasure house of learning. but the heart is a treasure house of spiritual wisdom. The so called conflict between religion and science arises only when there is no appreciation of the relative importance of these two types of knowledge. It's futile to try to glean knowledge of true values by exercise of the mind alone. Mind cannot tell you which things are worth having. It can only tell you how to achieve the ends accepted from intellectual sources. In most persons, the mind accepts ends from the promptings of wants, but this means denial of the life of the spirit. Only when the mind accepts its ends and values from the deepest promptings of the heart does it contribute to the life of the spirit. Thus, mind has to work in cooperation with the heart. Factual knowledge has to be subordinated to intuitive perceptions, and the heart has to be allowed full freedom in determining the ends of life without any interference from the mind. The mind has a place in practical life, but its role begins after the heart has had its say. Spiritual understanding is born of harmony between mind and heart. This harmony of mind and heart doesn't require the mixing up of their functions. It doesn't imply cross functioning but cooperative functioning. Their functions are neither identical nor coordinate. Mind and heart must, of course, be balanced, but this balance cannot be secured by pitting the mind against the heart or by pitting the heart against the mind. It can be attained not through the mechanical tension, but through intelligent adjustment. Mind and heart may be said to be balanced when they serve their proper purpose and when they perform their respective functions without erring this way or that. It is only when they are so balanced that there can be true harmony between them. Such harmony of mind and heart is the most important condition of the integral, undivided life of spiritual understanding.
Come up. Yeah.
Jay Baba, I think I have said my say in terms of interpreting this chapter. But again, I think I try to remember this. It's not only discrimination, but critical and creative thinking is a good way of what it says, bringing the results of critical and discriminative thinking. So I use the word CCD, creative, critical, and discriminative thinking, to make it much more, solid, rather
So,
than just saying vairagya, vivek, discrimination.
so Jay Baba,
Right.
Sunil, in a very simple, if I may add, so music, melody, and the balancing of the mind and the heart, which Kama also has highlighted. So basically, working in harmony and I think internal adjustment. They use the word adjustment between the mind and the heart. Both have got a role to in our spiritual journey. And something very profound, which Kama said, is that being God fearing or God loving in one of the earlier interpretations. So, I've been born in a Jain family and we had these rituals. We had a lot of rituals. We had to go to the temple. Then we have this retreat or Paryushan festival where we have to go into asking for forgiveness. So we used to do that very more or less in a God fearing manner. But after reading Discourses twice, I get the essence of what we do and why we do. Jai Baba.
Thank you, Jai Baba. We are past the time, so we can maybe stop here and then meet again next week.
Yes, Jai Baba, beautiful, excellent reading, Sunil.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashokji. Thanks for encouragement. Jai Baba. Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba, Sunil, you read 3 chapters, which is fantastic. Good flow.
Thank you.
Speed is good.
Jai Baba.
Speed is good.
Thank you.
Yes.
And lot of good content. Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai
Thank
Baba.
you. Thank
See
you,
you
Jai
again
Baba.
next weekend. Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
And also thanks to Jayanti for reading
Oh yeah, that was nice.
the 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. So yes. Everybody is now.
I think Karma aptly called me into that because I needed it right now at my life, and so aptly called me to read that one. I
Yes.
should thank Karma.
You should thank Baba. This is divine intervention. We are all in here, together. Maybe we have not met each other, but this karmic connection of our past lives or this present life has brought us together. I have never met many of the participants in this group physically.
Same here. Same here. Yeah. I too believe that no, we should have got some connections, and Baba is just bringing us for some cause.
Definitely. Jai Baba. Avatar Mehr Baba ki Jai.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Bye.